Hi, everybody, and welcome back to On the DL. There seems to be no greater issue right now, especially something that everybody is talking about, which is getting back to work. And most people at the top of their minds is this idea of staying safe, but yet being productive. So a lot of the people that I have spoken to have told me that they want to go to work, they want to leave their homes and their Zoom sessions behind, and they're excited to get back to their actual work environment. But they're also devastated that they have to go back to their work environment. And that is because a lot of people are heading back to work and it's toxic, that they're living and working in a toxic work environment. And I think that this resonates with more people than more people are willing to talk about because they're petrified to say it, and they're even more petrified to say it out loud right now. So that's why we are going to be talking about this idea that work can be toxic. My guest today is Melanie Pump, CFO and author. Melanie, hello.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
So nice to see you in beautiful Vancouver.
Yes.
That's lovely. Melanie, can you tell me the company that you are the CFO of?
Yeah, I'm CFO of Brain Inc. So we're in digital asset custody.
Digital asset
Yes,
custody?
we're in the crypto world, but we're in the custodian side of it. So a little bit different, not a crypto miner or exchange.
And can you define CFO for everyone listening?
Well, CFO is a chief financial officer, but what that means is I look after all the financial operations, all the needs of the business.
Okay, so you are considered, I guess, your top level in the
Yeah,
C-suite. You're right up there.
exactly. Yep. Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm the one who is responsible for the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that being said, right away people will be listening to this and go, yeah, okay, well, an executive, great. Dana's interviewing an executive. What does she know? You have also, or your experience, you can talk about how debilitating and how destructive it is personally to work in an environment that is toxic.
Right. And it is quite unique. A lot of people, when they look at the advocacy that I'm doing around healthy work environments, it's more common to see a human resource professional or an organizational psychologist talking about what I'm talking about. But,
Mhm.
I've spent the past 25 years working in corporate environments and have seen the good and the bad. But the other angle that I talk about from it is that from what I've seen, companies that have these toxic work environments also are not reaching their full potential from a financial perspective. So not only are people suffering, but businesses aren't doing as well as they could.
Well, of course, right? We think about it on every level, right? If there's toxicity, there's not going to be the productivity, um, personally and professionally. You're not going to get the most out of your people if you have bullies in place, if you have managers that act like assholes. You're just not. I mean,
You're
people are going to
not.
come.
Absolutely.
It
People
just
who are
doesn't work.
scared, when
Yes.
someone is scared, there's no way they're going to be productive. And there are still people out there who believe that fear can motivate, and fear can motivate to a point. But people do their best work when they're truly inspired, not when they're driven by fear.
Yeah, I think, and I've come to believe this, or I used to believe this, that this is just the way it is, right? Like it is what it is. Like you want to work in an industry, whatever industry that may be. And of course, you take the good with the bad, and there's good days and bad days, and good weeks and bad weeks. But it is what it is, and you suck it up, Buttercup. There's some bad
Yeah,
people out there and good people, but you know what? That's not the case. And
I,
that's why
I
I want to set the
agree.
record straight. That's not the
Yeah.
way it should be.
No, and it's nor is it the way it has to be. But the problem is that not enough of us talk about it. It is a bit of a taboo topic because it's attached to our livelihoods. So people are afraid of being open about it because they don't want to lose their jobs and therefore not be able to support their family. So they accept things that really aren't fair, and nor are they what's best for business. But then everybody just continues on in their careers because they think that's the norm, and it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be that way. You talk about how debilitating and how destructive personally it can be when you're in an environment like that. And I want to get into that because I think that will resonate with so many people. It will touch a nerve for sure. I think people will say, wait, that's me. That's me. That's how I feel every morning and every night. But first, I do want to talk about your bio. If I could just read a little bit about you, that would be amazing.
Definitely.
I know you said that we already talked about you being CFO, and this is part of it, but you're also an author, and I want to get into that. So you've had 20 years experience. You have a strong background in leadership, strategy, human resources, accounting, finance, and you've supported the success of various companies in technology, customer service, that's interesting, mining and retail. Melanie is also the author of Detox, Managing Insecurity in the Workplace, where she shares her learnings and experiences on the impacts of toxic work environments. Wow, so you've really been around. You've seen a lot of stuff.
I've seen a lot of stuff, yeah. And the piece of my story that's kind of left out of that is sort of how I formed this belief. And one of those things is because I entered the work environment when I was 21 without any education. I actually didn't finish high school. I started out as a complete feeling like an imposter. But I was lucky to get into a healthy work environment from my first one. And because of that, they believed in me and supported me and provided me with growth opportunities that helped me grow to where I am now at the executive level. So part of my passion behind this is having seen what can happen when you are in a healthy workplace. So I know we'll dive into the opposite side, but I also just wanted to share, part of this comes from me having seen in that 20 years, I've seen both. I've seen some great work environments as well.
And so if we could just rewind even more, go a little bit, take a few steps before your 20s, the idea of not having money and struggling and needing to have a job is something that is personal for you. You experienced that personally with your family.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I've always had that a bit of let's say now 25 years later, I feel more secure, but certainly earlier in my career, yeah, like I needed that job. I had to pay my bills. I felt, like I said, and many of us have this imposter syndrome. And when you have that, that makes you even more reluctant to speak up when you're not being treated fairly because you feel like you don't deserve to be there anyways.
That becomes cyclical, right? Like you feel like an imposter. You don't reach your potential. You're not reaching your potential. You're almost an imposter.
Absolutely. It's all cyclical. Like that's the thing. It all feeds off of each other. And the longer you go in your career feeling that way, it can be hard to unwind it. And then when you feel that way, you impact others as well, because people pick up on that negative energy from you. So it is all.
So I was reading that you, right from when you were born, your family was struggling with finances, and you, in your teens, that you had some turbulent years where you were experimenting with some drugs and not finishing school, and that would for sure impact your future. But you chose to go to work and do something with your life, which thank goodness you did choose that. So you do hold that part of your history. Yes. I assume, I don't want to say you're over it, but it is a part of who you are, and it probably fuels some decisions for sure.
Absolutely. And it's also why I have so much empathy. I mean, there's two sides to the work that I'm doing. There's the one of just believing businesses can be run better, but also just having a lot of empathy for people who aren't reaching their full potential because they unfortunately, they start out in a toxic work environment and then can never get themselves past it. I really do believe there's too many of us. All of us have talents, like we absolutely do. We just need to be working somewhere that allows us to get out of our comfort zone and discover it. And too few people do.
I always say that to people, that you have your job for a reason. Like you got there for a reason.
Yeah.
And don't let somebody take away your dream because, I hate to use this word again, because of an asshole, right? You don't know what goes on in their homes, in their house, and what shit they carry with them into work every day. I could tell you stories that could last hours on this show, but I'm not going to fill it up with all of my stuff because everyone's waiting to hear, oh, the big bad TV industry. There must be so many bad stories, and there are terrible stories. Some personal, some not. But it's not specific to just one industry. As I just
No,
said, it's
exactly.
tons. And again, I was reading about, as your career progressed and you went through a very difficult time in your life.
Mhm.
Fast forward, you're in your career and you had really bad leadership, which made things even worse for you. So maybe you could talk about that toxic time, because I think
Yeah.
that will connect. People will connect to that.
Yes. So this is one of the times when, a light really started to go on, and unfortunately, my partner passed away about 6 years ago now. And at that time, I was in a very toxic, unhealthy work environment. And I'd been able to manage it, prior to that. Maybe like everybody else, I kind of was, this is just the way it is, I can work through it. But then when I suffered that loss, my mental health was challenged. Dealing with grief is very difficult. And then it was compounded because I tried to continue working and be in that environment. But I noticed over time, I was not able to, deal with my grief, because every day I was dealing with negativity, and that was poisoning my psyche in two different ways. I was already dealing with challenges, and now I was dealing with a negative work environment. And that really showed me. So we all suffer through difficult times in our life, whether that be problems with child rearing or divorce or all these things. And if you then combine that with also being in a negative workplace, no wonder there's so many people that are dealing with depression and anxiety and mental health issues, because
Yes.
how do you manage the challenges of our personal life and then compound that with going to work and being fearful of your boss, or being treated with a lack of respect, or harassed or bullied, or any of these things?
Wouldn't you say, now I don't mean to be completely negative here, but wouldn't you say that's the norm?
you know I would really hate to say it isn't, but it is very, very common. However, having said that, it can be pockets. So I have been in work environments where I've been able to create a positive microculture, is what I would call it, for my teams. So one leader can really make a difference for the people that are below them, even if an overall culture is toxic. But yes, I can't disagree with you. It is very, very common, and which just shows you how little we don't talk about it, because this narrative should be much more public.
That's so interesting when you say one leader can make a difference. 100%.
Yeah.
One leader can make a difference, but one leader can also
Yes.
rule the roost and make it really, really bad for some people.
Absolutely.
Really bad for some people.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah. And if
And
that leader is at the top, like this is like if you have a CEO or a president or a head of operations who's like that, that will filter down, because people do look to the top leader to model the behavior. So absolutely, one leader can really create a toxic work environment. No doubt about it.
I will share with you, when I went through a very, very difficult divorce many, many years ago. Oh gosh, must be like 12 or so years ago now. It was a long time ago. Feels like a lifetime ago, when I went through a very hard time. And I would say two things. One, I would say my work has saved my life, gave me purpose every day to go. And I loved my job and I loved my work so much that thank God I had it, because it was such a good distraction. But on the other end of it, I was so fearful that if I did something wrong, if I lost my job, if I lost my money, how could I take care of my kids? It was everything all encompassing. It was imposter syndrome. It was fear. It was maybe a couple managers that I would say probably weren't so great at the time
Mhm.
as well. They're whatever, I don't know where they are now, but not there. And it was really a terrible feeling. So I was reading about this and I was thinking, gosh, I remember going through this feeling so alone and not talking to anybody about it, because I mean, I wasn't being bullied or abused or any of that. It just felt like, there just felt like icky stuff. Like it just felt wrong.
Yeah.
you know?
And there are a lot of things like that's the other angle is, when we think of a toxic work environment, our minds go to bullies,
Yeah.
and that really obvious stuff, but it can go deep. Like there's less obvious things that can also make an environment toxic. Like if people aren't transparent, for example, like if leaders aren't sharing with their employees of what's happening in the business, that can create a lot of insecurity because people don't know what's going on and they get blindsided by stuff. So that makes them scared, or they start coming up with their own storyline about what's happening. And we all know that when we come up with our own storylines, we generally imagine the worst thing. So if the company has really low transparency, that can create toxicity too. So it's funny, even though on the face of it, it may not be obvious why a work environment is toxic, there's a number of things that are less obvious than bullying that can really be damaging.
And then I'll tell you, then I went through a grieving period when I lost my father, and I had a fabulous boss and fabulous managers, and I kept saying to myself, "Thank God, I am still in such an incredible place." Like I just felt so much better than the decade before when I went through a heartbreaking life change.
And
So
that
you
must
can
have
see.
created so much loyalty. Like this is the thing, like it's when somebody treats us well, then we become really loyal and we want to actually work harder for them, right?
Right. Well, that's what I was just saying at the beginning. Like, toxicity does not promote anything.
No.
Right. So this idea that self-doubt becomes such a thing, right? It's such a huge thing for employees. Maybe you can talk about that because it's really something. I want people to listen to this and say, that's me, and I need to make the change, because I'm not going to change anybody else. We know we're not going to change anybody else, and I need to get back into a work environment, off my Zoom, and get into a building.
Yeah.
Right. I need to get over this. So what should we do for people?
Yeah. And like self-doubt, like that is such a hard thing. And we all deal with it. I mean, I can tell you, even just as recently as a few years ago, where I had a leader who was a bully, and this is me. So I've managed to grow my career, receptionist to CFO. I've proven myself. All of a sudden I had this person who it was almost like they were finding every little thing that I did that wasn't right, no matter how unimportant it was, or how could you even expect me to know it anyway, kind of stuff. And they would point out all those things. And then I started to question myself and feel like, has it just been all luck that I got to where I am today? Because we're hard on ourselves, many of us. So that really damaged my mental health, because I started having anxiety, and it took me longer to do stuff because I was worried about it. And eventually for me in that environment, I just decided to move on. I decided to leave, because you can sometimes create change, but you have to assess your overall environment. In that environment, I just saw that it was unlikely that leader was going to be moved out of their position. And for my own mental health, I kind of separated it, laid out the facts of the situation to be really clear to me, so my brain could stop tricking me into thinking it was actually my fault. And when I looked at the black and whites of it in writing, I was like, no, I need to move on. And I did, and much better opportunities presented themselves to me. But it's difficult for us to make that decision when we have dependents relying on us and that type of thing. But
I had a boss once who I think I'm laughing now, I'm giggling. At the time I wasn't giggling, I was really upset. But this particular manager or boss had called me, and we're in the news business, and of course it's you're presenting and you're giving facts, and this person just like laced into me for having typos. And if this would have been the only time this person had laced into me, I would have just been like, oh, okay, obviously typos really bothers this person. But when I say laced into me, I took my phone and I put it on speaker, and I put the phone down like that. I was with another person, and I wanted this other person to hear, because I thought, I have had enough of this. I'm not going crazy. And I've had enough of being chipped away over, like, really, talent is one thing, intelligence is one thing, fact finding is one thing, but typos,
Right.
typos.
And
I
you
was,
know what I think, that sounds like to me like that was an insecure leader themselves, because that's definitely been
oh,
something that I've observed, right?
yeah.
Is because of course, like, if you've hired someone to do a job what that they do really well, but then you minimize them by focusing on these little things that actually aren't important overall. And so that is, to me, that's somebody who probably, it feels like an imposter, feels insecure, so they try to minimize those around them. Unfortunately, that is not uncommon
Not
either.
nice. Yeah, not nice.
No.
That was one of many, many
Yeah.
experiences. This Jekyll and Hyde behavior you talk about. Maybe you can explain what that is.
Yeah. And that's
That
one that, I've seen it a lot. And what I mean by that is you may have a leader who 80% of the time is, fun to be around, treats you well, may even talk about your future and be supportive of that. But then let's say other 20% of the time, all of a sudden they lash out at you, they're critical at unexpected times, they insult your work. And that kind of, like, even though they're better 80% of, they're good 80% of the time, that unexpected part of the 20% will leave employees just completely, tiptoeing around, not certain when that person's going to explode. And
oh,
in many ways, I find that's actually worse than somebody who's in a bad mood all the time, because at least then you're prepared for it, like what you're going to get. But for us to have that kind of uncertainty and instability in a leader is very stressful for employees.
well,
And yeah.
well, here's the other thing. Okay, like leaders are human. They have
Yeah,
hopefully partners and families, and maybe they have aging parents or little kids, or they have it all. Like everybody has stress that they bring into work. You
of
hope
course.
they leave most of it, they leave most of it at the door when they come in. You hope, but we're
It's hard
humans.
to do.
Everybody,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that being said, nowadays, you know, I would hope and really hope that that behavior, what we saw a decade ago, or what I saw, close to 20 years ago, or whatever it is gone. Like it's unacceptable to act Jekyll and Hyde. It's
Yeah.
unacceptable to be, okay one day and not, I don't want to say completely psychotic, but borderline, because that's a
Or
little
highly
sociopathic.
reactive.
Yeah.
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 Unfortunately, it's not gone. And
Well, that's
like, we do
sad.
have to recognize none of us are perfect. And so
Right.
we all do, but I think as a leader, it's part of your responsibility to be self-aware and realize, okay, I'm really not in a good mood today. I need to minimize my contact, balance myself. If you have a bad temper, or you're highly reactive, because the damage that can do when people don't regulate their emotions is really big on employees.
Like really big.
It's
As you
huge.
said, it's a
Yeah. To
mental
be
health
constantly in
aspect.
fear that your boss is going
Yeah.
to explode at any moment. And I've experienced that.
Right.
It's
Me too.
extremely unsettling, and it'll damage somebody's mental health in for their personal life as well, because yeah, you'll find you're talking about work all the time with your friends because your leader is so difficult. So it permeates into your whole existence when you have a really challenging leader.
I've been away on a girls trip, and I have received crazy phone calls and emails, so much so that I almost felt that my girlfriends, had to do an intervention. They were
Yeah.
like, this has to stop. Like,
Yeah, that's
this
what
is
happened to me
not,
too.
you
Yeah.
did, you
And
had your
my
intervention.
girlfriends did the same
Yeah.
thing. I had a situation like that too, where the leader all the time messaging me
Yes.
different hours, and it was seriously impacting my life. And
Yes.
my girlfriends did the same thing. They're like, this isn't healthy for you. We see the impact this is having on you. And that was one of the things that pushed me to make a change. So that shows how important it is that we do share these things with people in our lives, because
Well,
when we're in it, sometimes we're not the best at assessing. We keep on rationalizing and justifying why it might be okay, because we're afraid. Changing jobs is a scary thing to do.
so
So
it's
right,
like
so we'll let it go. But sometimes
like
having an outsider look at it for you can really help you see it through a different lens.
well, I will tell you, after that experience, it didn't really change much. I was more defensive. I'm like, well, you don't understand. I'm a single mother and I don't have a choice, and I have to put up with this crazy person who I work with. But So I was actually more defensive, but
Yeah.
it did hit. Like I did sit with that for a while. I'm thinking, yeah, maybe maybe I need to get the ball rolling, but it was, a very, very long time ago, this particular experience that I'm telling you about. I think that, making that change, leaving a job is very much like leaving a husband, right? You don't want to,
Of
you,
course.
right? So
Yeah,
it
it's
would
a
be,
massive thing. Like you think about, we spend the amount of time that we spend on our work, and
yes,
we go, just like you go into a marriage hoping for the best and expecting,
yes.
not even hoping, expecting the best. When you go to a new job, you expect it to work out, and it's almost a failure. Even you might feel like it's a failure yourself if you give up on it. So it can be hard for us to make that change. And it's
So,
risky as well, because going to another job, you're not guaranteed that that
right.
environment's going to be better. So
The grass
there's
isn't
risk
always
associated.
greener, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You
it's
never
not always
know.
greener. It's not. But here's the thing. This is what I'm hoping for people, particularly now, as people are making their way back into buildings and back into actual environments. It's not just over Zoom anymore. And um, I'm hoping people have found the the ones that bring the toxicity and the ones, unfortunately, that have had to bear the toxicity, that both sides are bringing something more positive to their work environments now, because most people, like I was telling you, want to go to work.
Hmm.
It's, they want to be back in a work environment, socializing, being productive, getting off their computer. Maybe they'll find a hybrid somehow as we do this slowly, but they want to at least try. And
Yeah.
so it's very devastating to think that those people that want to try are actually fearful of going back in. So maybe what are
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah.
things, what can we tell people? Like, I just want people to feel better.
I do too, and the pandemic has, how we said a lot of people just kind of thought the office was the norm, and they probably rationalized why it was okay, and then
Mm,
being pulled out of that work environment and working from our homes, where we could protect ourselves more easily from a bully or somebody at work who is negative and always bringing you down. So I think
yes.
there's a much greater awareness when we're going back to the work environment now, as of to just how much better our mental health was when we weren't in the office every day, in some cases where
And
where
some, and
where
some.
environments were
Mhm.
toxic. So I mean, my recommendation to people is to be transparent, as much as you can, with your leaders, and let them know why working from home worked for you. If you do have a challenging relationship with your leader, try to have a discussion with them about it. One thing that I've observed is often people don't realize the impact they're having on others. Like many people don't realize that the things they say are hurtful, or how unexpected their behaviors can be. So sometimes even just having that discussion can create a change.
Really? Like, you're saying have the confidence, go in and speak to your leader, speak to your
I
boss?
mean, obviously every situation is different. But so people do need to assess their own situation. But I've done this myself, where I had a situation at work where this person, it just felt like every time they talked about my work, they were negative about it. They just assumed things weren't going to work out. I started really like disliking going into conversations and meetings with them. And
Mm,
I actually asked them to have a meeting and said that I wanted to discuss our relationship. And I did that. And I think it did two things. One, it highlighted to them how they were impacting me. And most people are good. Most people don't want to hurt other people. Sometimes they don't realize it. So I highlighted that to her, and she changed her behavior. But I also think it made her realize, wow, like this person has confidence, they have boundaries, they won't just allow that kind of behavior. And it completely shifted our relationship.
wow, that's empowering. I I couldn't imagine doing that.
I won't say that it was, so the interesting thing about it is that was actually in one of the more healthy work environments that I have been in. And I think that is why I was empowered to do it, because I
Mm,
knew this is a good environment overall. I am in a safe place. I'm going to take that and try to change the one relationship in this environment that isn't working for me. And I did that, and it changed the environment. So, on the other hand, I have also
good.
decided to leave work environments without having that conversation with someone, because I was able to assess that it was not going to change. And therefore it was better for me to just move on. So we do have to assess, the situation that you're in, what are all the factors. In this one environment, I knew that I would be supported, because it was a healthy environment overall. So we have to look at it, but the best place to start is by having transparent discussions.
And what are you telling HR departments right now? Like, what are you advising to on that side, not to the employee side? I mean, HR is employees, but what are you telling those departments right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex situation right now, because there's many different levels of anxiety in employees. So, some people still have a lot of anxiety about the pandemic. They're dealing with a lot of uncertainty about where things are going. So it really does come back to, again, I to overuse it, but transparency really is one of the most important things. So I am sharing that with the HR people that I talk about is we need to be open and honest with people about what we expect and where the business is going. And then they'll do that in return. So that really is the first, figure out, what's going on with people, what do they want, and then make decisions from there.
I think it's really important that we've normalized the idea of, you may be going to work and you love your work, but you hate your environment. Or maybe you love your environment, but there's a couple people that are just shitty, and they act shitty, and they have a whole host of their own problems that they, bring to work with them, and they take it out on people. And that seems to be the norm. That seems to be more of it, that seems to be more of the bigger issues, not the abuse and the bullying and the sexual assaults and all that seems very specific to certain environments.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking more the general, that there are just some people that are just not easy to work with, and they're not nice, and they maybe never should have been a manager or a boss or a leader, and they are, and you got to deal with them. But I'm hoping that this conversation normalizes that for people, because it is very common. And like you said, people just don't talk about it, and fear that, it's their livelihood, that they'll get in trouble, that things will become even worse for them at work. And I don't know what the answer is around that. And I don't know if you know what the answer is around that, but I think saying it out loud, like that day that I put my phone on speaker, I wasn't trying to get the manager in trouble. I just needed validation that I wasn't cuckoo. I'm not cuckoo. This person is cuckoo. It's not me. And I had the validation, and I felt so much better. I still felt horrible that evening. I remember really carrying it with me, feeling bad. And I didn't want to see that manager for days. I was very upset by it, but because it was the tone of voice, and it was the, really all the undertones, really that came with it.
Of course. But
so what do we say to people? Because it's like, what do we do?
I mean, being open, and so this is part of the work that I'm doing as to why I have started this advocacy around promoting how important healthy work environments are, because it doesn't get talked about enough. And so what I'm trying to do is help businesses to understand it's not just, this isn't just because we're trying to do what's right for people, although that is a huge driver for me. It's also about what's right for business. So for me, it's about really advocating that businesses do better when they treat their employees well. So building that, and if you're in an organization, if you're in a leadership position, start promoting that. Like, that's one thing that people can do is and start pointing out when you see things that aren't right, because we need to be showing what this is. And as an employee too, if you do have peers that are on your team who are making your life difficult, as you describe, one thing I really do try to highlight is when that happens, those people are usually going through something difficult themselves, or have gone through something difficult themselves. So often, if you can just approach that in a supportive way, and be, you've noticed that your relationship is challenged, and what can you do to work together to work through it? Often people will respond well to that, because like I said, they don't always know what's happening. So putting it out there, nothing is ever going to improve if we don't talk about it. So we don't want to just keep holding it in.
I'm so glad you just said that. Say it again, and say it a million times. I always say it, you have to talk about it.
We do have to talk about it. Yeah, I agree. And that's what we're doing.
Exactly. That's what we're doing. How can people find your book?
Yeah, so my book is called Detox: Managing Insecurity in the Workplace. So it's focusing on toxic environments and how that increases the level of insecurity that employees feel and drives all kinds of unproductive behaviors. It's available on Amazon, and then also through my website at melaniepump.com.
And how do people find you generally? Would it be at your website or through your social
So
channels,
you
or
can
all
go
of
through
it?
my website, but I mean, I'm the most of my stuff is posted on LinkedIn. So Melanie Pump on
Okay.
LinkedIn, but it's also Melanie Pump CFO on Instagram and Twitter as well.
Melanie, it's been really wonderful speaking with you. I don't want to say joyful because it feels like this is not a joyful conversation, but it's
Yeah,
helpful. It's helpful because normalizing something that so many people keep inside and never want to talk about,
yeah,
and that it's making them feel really, really terrible,
yeah,
needs to get out there. We just got to,
exactly,
find somebody, talk about it, flesh it out, come up with a plan. You know,
exactly. Yeah.
figure out how you're going to go about it. But it's been truly great. I
Well,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thanks so
Thank
much for having
you.
me.
Thanks, Melanie. Be well.
All right.
Stay well.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.